was going to do, so that when he began to move, already it was too late. He stood by her head and bowed, and touched his ear to her parted lips. Still they were a person's lips, solid, not yet sand, but cold. It lasted only seconds. Then there was a hand on his shoulder, softly pulling him away. But in those seconds his ear closed on her mouth and made a seal, so that nothing separated them. Everyone saw from the teacher's face that he was listening, though listening for what? Nobody could say, with Nana Ofariwa's life already gone. Then the seal was broken, and the air rushed between them. On her cheek there were drops of water from the stream where they found her, or from the rain when they carried her in. On her forehead there was grass like green stitches. Her eyelids were closed. Someone moved towards them, and there was a hand upon her shoulder, and voices talking, saying to come away. Then there were people between him and Nana Ofariwa. Turning, the teacher looked at her for the last time. A little while later, the deputy commissioner himself arrived from Nsawam with 3 uniformed men in the back of his car. The people stood back to let him pass, and though a few stayed to watch, the room was almost empty as the body was wrapped in a grey blanket and suspended, a man at each corner, and taken out through the back door. Many of the onlookers left now, some to go back to their search for the children, who still were missing, but most stayed in the precincts of the rest house, not as before in a state of confusion, but aware now that the events of the night must have started somewhere, and that they would lead to other places still. That now there was something to be done, a story to be pieced together, of what happened that night. That not one of them could have told singly, though already it had begun to form and was living among them. There were 10 days more to run before the first parts of the story were heard out loud. They had to wait until the funeral was past and the newspapers had finished their work, but all the while, wherever people met, the story was sifted and mulled and woven and connected, and always some old fact was remembered in a new way, and another was linked to a further still, and opinion was spun backwards and forwards between the 20 or so things that could be said definitively, until it made a platform so complete and strong as to constitute knowledge. Then one person was chosen to tell the story. Kwaku Wilkins Adofo, town doctor and former unit head at Tete Kwarshi Memorial in Mampong, now retired. A month after Nana Ofariwa was discovered, a meeting was held of townspeople, which he was called on to address, not because he'd been witness to any of the events leading up to the death, but because in the days that followed, he was the only person who had had access to the teacher, and so, everyone believed, although in fact it was not so, access to the last hours of Nana Ofariwa's life. The assembled people listened quietly as Kwaku Wilkins Adofo stood up to speak that Wednesday evening in the largest of the town's church halls, although not even it could accommodate all the people who wanted to attend, and chairs had to be set out behind the podium, and the doors opened onto the quadrangle between the hall and the church, so that those outside could also hear. The doctor stood at the front of the hall. Seated behind him, a row of dignitaries and other senior people. Next to him was a bare table, on which he placed his hat and spectacle case. Though he spoke clearly and slowly, the people outside had to strain to hear him, as his voice was soft. At first, only those in the front heard his opening words. Agu. I would like to talk. So that the response rippled slowly back to him through the crowd like a wave. Ami. We are listening. He was methodical in his testimony, embellished nothing and missed nothing. It is true that Nana Ofariwa died alone. A sound of indignation rose through his listeners, that such a death should befall a woman of her stature, cold, drowned, covered in mud under a bridge. But we are all alone at the moment of death. That is how death takes a person. It was quiet enough after that for them to hear the hollow thunk of glass on wood as he put down his cup. It is true, he said, but also nothing happens invisibly among people. And then he said how in being seen there's a kind of company.